And I'm really proud to say that the festival has made major strides in putting Hawaii on the map as a culinary destination and also giving our younger chefs an opportunity to shine. However, despite this success over the last 6 years, we have not moved the needle on food production and continue to produce only 10 to 15% of what we consume in Hawaii. During those 6 years, we also split the Hawaii Food and Wine Festival from the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation so the Agricultural Foundation could continue its work to develop programs that directly benefit farmers and the agricultural industry. About 2 years ago, a young legislator, and it's not Donovan because he's old already, asked me if the Ag Foundation could develop another food event that would be less expensive and more accessible with a focus on educating the general public about agriculture because of the divisiveness on ag issues in the community. Genetically modified organisms, pesticide, farm-to-school practices, food safety, land management, water rights, scarcity of fish, etc. are some of the issues that have divided us and perhaps have kept us from being focused on our area of common ground, our desire to move the needle forward on food production in our state. To solve this issue, we have to think locally and globally, and we also have to work collaboratively. While there are many viewpoints, there is no right or wrong, just a different perspective on how we get there. Everyone wants to feed the world, everyone wants better nutrition, everyone wants a cleaner and more sustainable planet. Everyone has the right intentions in mind to make Hawaii and this world a better place. But to make it work, communication, respect, open dialogue, and clear vision for where we want to go has to be at the forefront. Hawaii Ag Foundation created Eat, Think, Drink because when you share a bowl of rice or a loaf of bread, that's where the conversation starts. Not with fighting words, not with people screaming and yelling at each other, but by having respectful and meaningful conversation over a meal. It's like the plantation workers who came from different places many years ago. They shared their culture, their food, and they worked together. So please enjoy this evening. We are here to eat, think, drink, collaborate, learn, and share with each other. We are so thankful to have our panelists, John Martin of Vice and Vice Munchies, Judah Law from Kahuku Farms, Alex Su of Aloon Farms, Wendy Akiyama of Armstrong Produce, Senator Donovan de la Cruz, who has been a champion of agriculture and a visionary for the Whitmore Village Project. I would also like to thank our moderator, Molly Solomon, who would lead the panel into thoughtful dialogue. She is currently General Assignment Reporter for Hawaii Public Radio and covers tourism, education, and sustainability. But first, we would like to start our conversation with our keynote speaker, Chef Michelle Nishan, who's a 3-time James Beard Award winner and CEO of Wholesome Wave. And I know a lot of you are policy people, because I know a lot of you. And if you don't know what a James Beard Award is, it's like the Oscars for chefs in the culinary world. He received the 2015 James Beard Humanitarian Award and is a mentor, inspiration, and leader in the sustainable food movement. I met Chef Nishan 6 years ago at the first Hawaii Food and Wine Festival, where I learned about Wholesome Wave and its amazing work he's doing to build a sustainable food system by providing low-income individuals with access to fresh fruits and vegetables. I last saw him in April at the Pebble Beach Food and Wine Festival and asked him to help the Ag Foundation launch Eat, Think, Drink. And without hesitation, he told me, "You tell me when and I'll be there." He flew from New York last night and arrived at 2 p.m. today. He's an amazing chef, a great human being, and a leader and inspiration for so many. So please join me in welcoming Chef Michelle Nishan.
Maybe we can start a conversation that really makes sure that it stays beautiful for generations to come. So, yes, it's there. Awesome. So I'm best known as a chef for over 35 years, but I'm proudest to be the son of farmers from the South Central Midwest. And I learned how to deal with food from a very young age, and I'm proud of that. My mom was one of 13 farm children from southeastern Missouri. I worked on my grandfather's farm until age 17. Learned how to raise animals, vegetables, how to cook, how to can, how to pickle, how to cure, all of that great stuff. my understanding of food as a farmer and as a chef runs very, very deep. When I was 18, I got a job in a restaurant because at least I could eat. And I learned that, though, that very quickly by looking at the produce that was coming in the back door, that the way that my grandfather raised beautiful, delicious food, like a ripe tomato, had become extinct. I no longer felt that I had the freedom to choose the type of food that I wanted to eat, like a ripe tomato, or to even make it available in my own business. So I searched out farmers, farm-wide, tried to get them to grow what I wanted them to grow, paid them in advance for their food so that they would. And I never really imagined that getting just a good ripe tomato or any wholesome food would be so difficult. But I was determined then, and my love of food caused me to believe that this could be changed. So at the time, I wasn't aware that I was joining a group of change-making chefs around the country. We're all working independently, but kind of together on the same thing. We did believe that good food should be available and a right to everybody, and we kind of became founders of the Good Food Movement. A couple of new guys up there recently, like Tom and Jose. But because of this early, difficult work, it's a lot easier today to find the type of food that my grandfather and my mother used to grow. It's easier. It really is. And now we're living in a day where a significant number of people actually know the joy of a local strawberry, that there are many varieties of oysters, tons of varieties of delicious tomatoes. Artisan and heirloom foods can now be found from farmers markets to Piggly Wiggly to Whole Foods to restaurants to all y'all's table at home. So I think that's exciting. So for the upscale food movement, farmers market community, food's become this kind of form of freedom, right? Freedom of choice, expression, flavor, place. It's also an opportunity to differentiate, foster credibility, to demonstrate true authenticity. Important things. Our restaurants really became a place where meaningful change was occurring. But even if all upscale restaurants tomorrow went farm to table, it would represent less than 5% of the entire marketplace. So how can we imagine a truly sustainable, bright food future when millions of Americans can't even afford a ripe tomato? So that's kind of nuts. 64 million Americans can't afford our restaurants, can't even put good ingredients on the table. They live in food deserts, urban and rural. The state of Iowa is classically defined by the Centers for Disease Control as a food desert. It's amazing. So a lot of folks say that this lack of access that exists, coupled with lack of education, what to do with fresh food is the problem. If we solved access, we could teach poor people how to cook something like this. You know? Nice grilled chicken breast, not a complicated thing, some sweet potatoes, a little bit of greens, and a squeeze of fresh lime. And many believe this inexpensive meal could be easy for a family struggling with poverty to get on their table, but because of lack of education, people struggling with poverty can't do this $3.50 meal because they're hooked on value meals at fast food restaurants. Wrong. Value meals start at $5. They go from $5 to $7. And that amount of money is what a food stamp shopper has to spend for the entire day on food. So the reality is that this is what's for dinner tonight. If you made what's on the left for dinner tonight, you don't have enough money for breakfast and lunch tomorrow. That's real. So, you know, even though SNAP consumers get just $4 a day to spend on food, where'd I go? Sorry about that. Oh, wait, I got a clicker. I'm going to do that. It's a big amount of money when you multiply that times 44 million people. $70 to $80 billion a year in SNAP and another 91 cents per person for every dollar on SNAP or food stamps spent. It's a $130 to $150 million consumer marketplace. If we could just get 20% of that shifted to local, more sustainably raised, healthier food, it would equal the global annual sales of all organic from every country. That's real power, and underserved consumers don't know they even possess that. So I see it as an opportunity. Here's another opportunity. In 2007, $800 billion for the 7 diet-related diseases in 2007. Today, it's $500 billion just for the middle 4. Heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, stroke, right? So imagine if these underserved consumers could shift all their money towards healthier food choices. What would that number become? What would that do for our economy? I founded Wholesome Wave in 2007 to answer that question. Act on this opportunity by really exploring and finding out if there really is demand in communities of poverty for good food. We started in 2007. By 2008, we were in 3 small states, doubling food stamps when spent on fruits and vegetables at farmers markets. By 2011, we were in 20 states, piloted a fruit and vegetable prescription program, but for our doubling program, we studied a few years in a row, 3,000 SNAP consumers, different every year, their consumer attitudes. We studied 3,600 farmers. We proved that underserved consumers want good food. If they can afford it, they'll buy good food. And we demonstrated that small and mid-sized farmers put more land in production, made infrastructural investments to their business, hired more people, diversified their crop plantings to meet a new and vibrant market. And as a result, in 2014, we were able to get the Food Insecurity Nutrition Incentive Program into the Farm Bill, $100 million in federal money to double food stamps when spent on fruits and vegetables. Now, last year, we made it into 42 states. This year, we're in 46 states. And all of this was made possible by bipartisan support and unlikely alliances. That's Frank Lucas, the Tea Party chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. That's Debbie Stabenow, the Democratic chair of the Senate Ag Committee. The two of them got together and said, hey, if poor consumers, people struggling with poverty, want to eat better food, this program lets that happen. At the same time, it benefits farm businesses. No more classic of a small business than an American farm. They said this is worth passing. You know, but even, and we had to set up, we had to partner with fierce competitors of ours, large global produce associations. United Fresh Produce is the largest produce association in the world. Western growers. People that I'm often in a room with them and folks, colleagues of mine from the Good Food Movement, and nobody wants to talk to each other because either it's organic or it's not. Either it's scalable or it's not. Either it can feed the world or it doesn't. There's no middle ground. The one thing we were able to do to get all of these people to agree on was that people struggling with poverty should be able to afford to put a ripe tomato on the table for dinner tonight. And as a result, we were able to pass that. But you know, all in, us, our competitors, all the grocers that have come on board to access this Food Insecurity Nutrition Incentive Program, we're only reaching 500,000 of 45 million people. So we need to make that $100 million, $10 billion. To do that, we're going to have to bring large retail grocers to the table, Walmart, Kroger's, produce distribution companies to redevelop a supply chain that can make this possible. Walmart just pledged again, after over the last 5 years, making it possible to have 15% of all their fresh food come from within the state where their stores are, to double that by 2025. Now, you might not agree with some of their practices, but when it comes to reaching millions of Americans who need a ripe tomato and need to be able to afford it, they're a worthy partner. Because when you can go to Washington with large-scale companies, with produce associations, with small-scale farmers, mid-sized farmers, 1,000 community-based nonprofit organizations who all agree on something, and there's not a fight, Congress people listen. Because they can say, this is something that all businesses want. This is something that all Americans want. So it's important. For those who might not believe in the power of the underserved consumer, this is one of my favorite studies, because this actually tells us exactly why Walmart is doing what they're doing. This is in the Waverly neighborhood of West Baltimore, the poorest community in the Mid-Atlantic, multi-generation African American. And when they did this study, they didn't ask any questions about organic. It was all write-in. And this is the outcome. So when we talk about the power of the consumer, when we talk about how that can be a shift and a maker for change, it's really imperative that all of us come together, regardless of our differences, to make that a reality. So I was hoping to use this presentation. I'm already kind of like out of time, it looks like. But you know, I think when you guys look at some of the things that you're struggling here with in Hawaii, energy costs, cost of land, water usage, 85 to 90% of the food you produce leaves, 85 to 90% of the food you consume comes in from off island. Seems kind of simple. It's like you can automatically shift that. But it's not that simple. And the problem is that all of the people that can come together and actually look at the policies that can change this aren't willing to sit at the same table and have a conversation. And that's a big problem. It's a big problem. I look at costs of energy, wind, hydroelectric power, solar. What are the current state and federal policies, and how can they be leveraged by all businesses of all sizes to try to get some traction that make it more affordable for people? Cost of labor, Uberitizing it. Opportunities like TaskRabbit to outsource and plug people into agricultural jobs, but current regulations don't allow that to happen. Water usage. Organic and biodynamic practices clearly sequester more water than any other practice, you know? But then imagine what happens if you actually combine those approaches with more current technologies, because people are working together so that we can actually deal with the climate change that's real and upon us. So when I think about all of these things that all of you all are facing, and I hear some of the language coming from both sides of this argument, this divide where people are refusing to get together, I just have to scratch my head and wonder how you guys can find that aina that allows you, regardless of what side of that aisle you're on, to welcome me here with the love that you do and reflect that back on each other so these important conversations can be had. So my prayer for all of you is that you can set the anger aside and drop the assumption of negative intent. I had another thing I was going to bring to the table, but you all can read an article that Jolene Oshiro did, where I kind of described how we got to the food system that we're at. It was not by evil intent. It was out of necessity. It was out of hope to feed the world. It was a real opportunity that the American public, Congress, and the President believed in, and that created the current subsidy system. Doesn't mean it's right. We didn't know at the time what the environmental impact would be and what the impact of processed food would be on human health. But it got there through consensus. The only way we're going to unwind it is if we all come together and find some kind of an acceptable consensus that we can all live with. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. I do love you all. You guys have a lot to deal with. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on your problems, but I am always available to anybody who wants to talk to me. So thank you very much for your time.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. As a news person, I'm trying my best not to look at my phone right now. So thank you, though. And thank you so much for a great talk, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Food media should be telling that story. It should be pushing people to want to get out in the world and experience those things. So when you have a place like Hawaii, that has an amazing food culture on so many different levels. One of the big questions is, where do you start? And that's something that, we say, okay, our audience, it's young people, right? It's like 18 to 34-year-olds. What are they really into? Okay, they're people who are, they're first or second jobs at a school. They are living on their own. They're just experiencing getting into the food world. Do they want a stuffy, fine dining food video? No. Do they want something that's like a food contest television? No. They don't want cook-offs. They want real people. They want real food. They want to see how food is something that is accessible to people, because it really is. And one of the things that we have become known for is doing a cold open on all our videos, where we show the chef messing up, because everyone messes up. You're not perfect, and it's okay if you cut something wrong, you burn something, or you're using a piece of shit aluminum fry pan. It's okay. So we want to, if we're to tell the stories of Hawaii, we find people that connect with the audience, that look like them, that talk like them, that feel like they're part of their culture, that they can connect with. Maybe the audience already knows about them via social media and everything internet, and we tell those stories. And in Hawaii, it could be anything from new chefs in Honolulu to farmers around the islands to hunters to fishermen. There's an incredible amount of stories. It's just incredible.
And in the short time that you've been here, you've been able to experience some of that firsthand as well. You were just telling me how you just got back from Molokai and you were hunting for venison there.
Yes, and it was interesting learning about the axis deer in Molokai and sort of the how they got here and the perception of them now, and also learning how they taste, which is quite nice. And that's just one story, and there's millions of those stories in Hawaii. And I think it's something that Hawaiian food is. I live in New York, and I work in food, so I'm bombarded with it all day. And it may feel that Hawaiian food is having a moment on the mainland, but so is a lot of other things. And I think it's really important for media and people who live in certain areas to be always pushing their own story and being their own best advocate. That's the way you're going to get your stories told to national and international audiences, global platforms. It's really important to be a champion of the place that you're from. And there's a lot of benefits that gives you. Everything from your food industry here gets to sell food to people who wouldn't have normally experienced it. People come to Hawaii to eat the food here, and that's a great thing. Right now, if Hawaii I think has an opportunity to become a food destination in the way that you look at Copenhagen and then in everything new Nordic, and that's something that we get bombarded with in the food world. I think Hawaii has an opportunity to offer a totally different perspective and tell some really unique stories that don't exist anywhere else in the world.
And, I feel like Hawaii, especially the dining scene here, the food scene here, it's really evolved in the last 5 years or so. And as somebody that's maybe coming from the mainland, do you see that? Do you see that perception of Hawaii dining, Hawaii food, what's grown here, is that changing too?
This is my first time in Hawaii, and it's interesting. I work in Brooklyn. There's a Whole Foods that opened up 3 blocks from my office, and there's a daily processional or exodus from the office to Whole Foods for lunch every day. And like half of the 1,000 employees, I'm not joking, get the poke bowl. And there's just this line of, if you want to see your coworkers, you should go somewhere. You go to the line, you can see them all, because everyone's going for these poke bowls, because it was something that you really couldn't get in New York at all. And now there's some chains on the West Coast that are starting to do it. And I think that's a really positive thing. As far as media goes, is it a great story that Whole Foods is doing poke now? Not really. But is there a great poke story in Hawaii and tracing the history of that and people that are doing it and what it means culturally? For sure. And then you can tell those type of stories for every single ingredient or type of person involved in food, and it becomes really exciting.
Yeah, and sort of connection to the community that that food comes from. That's an important part of that. Sort of switching gears here from media to farming. I want to introduce Judah Lum. His family runs Kahuku Farms on the North Shore. It's I think you said it was a small big farm or a big small farm, somewhere in between there. But you have that perspective of having a smaller farm when you look at, the grand scheme of farming here. I wonder what it's like for you as a business person growing food in Hawaii. What are some of the challenges that you face, not being a large farmer, but working at a smaller scale and with a more specialized type of product?
Thank you. Definitely a lot of challenges. You'll talk to a lot of farmers here in our state that we're constantly dealing with, and we could talk an hour about the challenges that we have in growing food in our state. However, I think for us, in our family, in our situation, we're very blessed because of the fact that we're able to participate in the supermarket, which is where a lot of the food that's bought and sold is bought and sold to go into restaurants and households and food trucks. You'll see them popping up a lot of different areas. We're on the North Shore, so there's a lot of food trucks out there. So the food supply system we have here has really allowed a lot of businesses to thrive. But when it comes to the actual product and what it costs and what goes into it, it's very high. And we're not competing on a local market any longer. And I think talk to this gentleman next to me, he understands definitely what the market does to the business of agriculture. And so for us as a family, we really noticed the value in education and offering people the opportunity to come to a farm, because what we do is open up our farm to the public for the purpose of telling our story. And the story is that all forms of agriculture can be very useful and are very important. The conventional farm compared to the small natural farm, compared to the new styles of growing things hydroponically, these are all definitely things that have a role to play in our food security. And like our keynote speaker said, having the ability to agree on something is really important to making changes and understanding that people coming together is what makes things better. And I think for our family, it's very important that we're able to continue working in this business and at least for another generation. And so this is a big part of what we do as far as opening our gates to the public for education, for demonstration, and for the purpose of value adding. And these are just a tool that we've noticed that can be used to really create stability for a small family farm.
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone has gone up to Kahuku Farms, but it's true, you guys have really done something different. You've opened up the farm. You have these tours where people are not just going there to pick up some bananas or papaya. They're actually going to the source and finding out, where does the food come from and what is the story of your family and how you guys created this farming business there. And you have a cafe as well, which I love your banana bread. But those sort of value-added things, the way that you've been able to sort of realign your business, it's not just a farm, it's much more. Has that helped you to be able to deal with some of the challenges that come with farming here, some of the costs of farming here?
That's the intention. Obviously, to diversify is definitely expensive. Anytime you're involved in an entrepreneurial project, there's always the risk and reward factor that needs to be considered. So, when you look at agriculture as a business, it's a part of being sustainable as a business is remaining profitable. And when you look at the chances of losing your investment or not getting a fair price at the market, these are all risks that are very real for anyone involved in this business. And it's also very easy to, what shall I say, fail. So when you look at it within a business dynamic or business in parentheses, food is not a right when you think about it, because if it was a right, there wouldn't be anyone that's hungry. It's a privilege. And I think one of the messages that I always send home to our guests that come to visit is that When you are in the middle of something, such as a food system, I'm the first one to always agree that it can always improve, but it's easy to take it for granted as well. And I like people to be able to leave the farm with a little more value for the facts that many of us today no longer are personally responsible to take care of plants or animals so we can survive. You know, we're very fortunate that we have the ability to spend our time going to work, getting an education. You know, a lot of people today enjoy traveling. We have a wonderful, tourism industry here in Hawaii, and not to let alone a lot of the people in our culture just have a lot more time to spend doing things that they wouldn't have if they were dependent or they were responsible for the food that they ate. And so, we all are definitely in a position of advantage because we do have a thriving agricultural business that's meeting the demand of a lot of people, and a lot of people are no longer involved in nature. And you can see that nature and technology are kind of a dichotomy, and where you need them both, but yet they're very, I don't know, maybe I'm making the wrong analogy, but nature and technology are very different sides of a conversation. And I think the bottom line is we are very privileged, and we're very fortunate to live in a day and age where we can enjoy so many more things and not struggle to survive. And I think that's something we all need to live every day remembering. And this is a conscious choice we make every time we eat or we buy food. We have to really appreciate it and know that we can improve, but it takes a working together and a lack of criticism. Maybe criticism is important, but maybe just not as judgmental, and learning more and also participating wherever you can.
Yeah, being able to find a common ground or a place of understanding. I think that's important when we talk about food and ag, because a lot of people are very passionate about that, I think of my own family, we wouldn't have moved to Hawaii if it wasn't for agriculture and the sugar or the pineapple here. So people do have that personal connection to it. And I think being on an island, you can't help but have that personal connection to it. It's right there. A big issue when you talk about agriculture and being able to try to improve sustainability here, Alec, is the business of farming. I think you are somebody that probably understands that. The general manager of Loon Farms, probably one of the second or third largest farms here in Hawaii. How is it that you're able to, what are some challenges that you see as somebody that's made a business of trying to grow food on this island or this set of islands?
We've actually, this year will be our 40th year farming in Hawaii. It's a family farm, and we grow over 24 variety of produces. And as long as we've been around, we're still constantly evolving. There's years where we're gonna hit some real rough water, and we're at the Mother Nature mercy, and you have to push through. And we're constantly looking at ways to, even though we've grown like corn, sweet corn, zucchini for many years. We started out with Asian vegetables, but we're still constantly doing trial variety because it's constantly evolving, where we're seeing new diseases, new viruses, new insect that breeds in Hawaii faster than anywhere. As many people, the homeless that wants to come to Hawaii, the insect never goes away here. So you're constantly in a battle. But to echo some of the colleagues here, Hawaii is blessed from the standpoint that we are able to produce literally year-round. It has its challenges by being able to do year-round, but to many of my surprises, every time I do travel, and I think a lot of people in this crowd have been very fortunate to travel around the world. And believe it or not, some of the produce that we do get here are extremely high quality, fresh. Some of the Asian vegetables that we get here, it's probably, I would say, 90% better than the 1.5 billion Asian that consume Asian vegetables in Asia. So we are fortunate, but a lot of times we don't realize that. And then our problem is we don't know how to use some of that. But I think in recent time, in the advances of media, has helped many of us learn to use different things to bridge, what is not, what you don't know, and just turn on YouTube and learn a dish that you never dream you can. So there's a lot of advances in Hawaii, I think in food industries also been pushed by media. It has to go hand in hand. The advances of social media, we're still trying to figure the best use of it because it's constantly evolving faster than we can put together.
Yeah, I wonder too, as somebody that represents, a larger farm, especially compared to maybe Judah's or some of the other smaller farms in the state here, how critical do you think that plays a role in being able to, grow the amount of food that we're able to have here and we're able to feed ourselves in this state?
I think it's critical that we keep trying. As the population continue to evolve and grow, I think the demand is, as we're center tourism, we can't keep up, literally. And I know a lot of people in this room are in the food industry or distribution. The demand seems to be outpacing what we can produce, believe it or not. We have resources, we have tremendous amount of land, no doubt, and I think Senator here would speak about that. There's places that you don't have this type of quality land. You may have land, but you may not have the weather that you can grow certain crop. As much as we grow corn, the whole world, U.S. is the biggest producer of corn. The actual sweet corn that's grown for self-consumption, we import more of that than we actually grow in the United States because you can only grow so many months in California, Arizona, and Florida. Other time of the year, it's imported because we're too cold. Same with a lot of things. We can literally grow everything here, but we don't realize to get some of the vacant land, particularly we're entering another period where sugar is coming out. The last biggest sugar plantation out of Maui is vacating. Now, 1990 was the first wave of Wailua sugar going out, and then 95 was Oahu sugar that went out. So Oahu had to kind of evolve between government, private, and various people in business in food had to really figure out how do we make best use of what's going to be vacant. And I think coming together, whether directly or indirectly at times, figuring out those key things like connecting water to a most efficient system. Who's going to own that system? Who's going to convert some of these ground from raw land that can only be produced certain things, but you need to amend the soil. So a lot of that is I always consider that was the first wave, 1990 and 95, and now we're facing another wave of what's coming up in Maui. And if you look at the other Big Island, Kauai, Lanai has been vacant forever. Molokai is vacant. Big Island is just actually beautiful ground just left in, basically underutilized. So there's a lot of potential for Hawaii. But I think we need to, like our keynote speaker said, come together, kind of connect the dot and maybe get rid of some of those pretenses and just try to make those resources available.
I want to bring in Wendy Akiyama. She's with Armstrong Produce because in some ways you really connect the consumer to the product, to the farm, what they are able to produce. As somebody that is, going in between there, what do you hear? I feel like most people now want local. They want locally grown food. That's, buy local has sort of become the new catchphrase. Is that something that we can do here in Hawaii? And how do you guys try to work towards making that a reality?
Well, like Alex said, the demand is there. And I think he's right. The demand outweighs the supply many times. But Armstrong is fully committed to supporting local farmers first. That's our first core value actually for the company. So it is very important for us to source local first. It becomes a challenge when there's not enough. And we have to figure out how to balance that because our customers expect 100% fulfillment every day, whether it's local or not. You know, if we get word that the next shipment of local cabbage isn't coming, we have to figure out how we're going to get cabbage in to deliver before we run out. So it's a challenge for us too, but as long as there's farmers growing produce safely, we'll be there to distribute because the demand is there, and we want to support our people because we want to keep it, you know, in the state, the money, and not have to bring in. We work with our farmers to try to replace imports because that's how important it is for us. But you know, we're concerned about the future farmer because it's hard work. The challenges that were said by everyone is a reality, actually. Labor, water, the expense of doing business. And how do you get a young person to want to farm? You know, to me, that's what we should be looking at because we just lost 2 of our Big Island leaf growers. They're retiring, and their sons actually work on the farm, but they're not going to continue in the same capacity. So, you know, it's really hard for us to imagine that there are going to be a whole bunch of farmers taking over the next generation.
And you know, there's a price to choosing local as well, especially when, you know, we are in Hawaii where we have the highest electricity rates and it's so expensive to purchase land here. Is that something else that comes into consideration when figuring out, you know, what supermarkets want to work with you or want to distribute local food? Does price and how much the consumer is willing to pay for
Right.
local?
Yes, I think at the end of the day, everybody has to look at what's in their budget and what they can afford because people want to support local, but can they afford to do it? I mean, even restaurants, hotels, it's the bottom line always. So if you have mainland strawberries costing about $15 a case during the summer and you have a local strawberry costing close to $20 a case, they have to take a look at what their budget is and what they can afford to do. I mean, everybody wants to do the right thing, but at the end of the day, you're looking at the bottom line. So it is very costly to do business in Hawaii, to import the fertilizer and the machinery, labor costs, and all of that. So that's something else that we're competing with. Whether we like it or not, it's a reality because people see the price differences everywhere, you know.
Donovan, I want to bring you into State Senator Donovan De La Cruz. Thank you for being here tonight on election night as well. Appreciate it. But I'm curious where you see, you know, room for growth for, you know, locally produced food and agriculture in Hawaii, especially from more of a policy government perspective.
Well, there's a couple of things that we can do right away. Our state agencies could purchase local. Department of Education, University of Hawaii, all of our concessionaires within the state, if we ask them to purchase local, that would create even more of a demand for local, which I hope would support farmers in scaling up. But in regards to some of the challenges that they all talked about, I feel like it's government's responsibility to help contain the cost of their overhead. It's too expensive for a farmer to go and buy land. So if the state buys land and provides a long-term lease and the farmer can get a loan, they can invest in the farm. The state can even provide rent credit to help with offset some expenses. The state can invest in water infrastructure. I know just from my own experience with some of them, helping them maneuver government with their property tax issues, or maneuver government with an enterprise zone. How do we help them? And there just hasn't been anyone that really owned it from an affordable housing perspective, or education perspective, or taxing perspective. So we can do all the policy, we can create a lot of laws. But I don't know if that's really going to solve the problem versus just really fixing some of these issues.
And I wonder too, because, you know, somebody who represents Hawaii at that state level, I'm sure that there's a lot of issues that people are fighting over, whether it's, you know, we want this land for housing, or we want this land for agriculture. How do you kind of balance that? And is there a way that you see making ag more of a priority?
Well, I feel like a lot of people talk about it as a priority, but where you spend your money shows if it's a priority or not. So a couple of years ago, we had, I'll give you one example. We had a couple of issues. I think it was called Lepua Point on Maui that the state purchased. The state helped with Turtle Bay. But when we tried to go and buy ag land, not too many people showed up. Nobody really emailed the legislature. Nobody called the legislature and said, hey, we should buy ag land. But when it came to conservation issues or stop development issues, we were flooded with emails. So somehow we have to kind of be proactive versus just reactive in wanting some of these things to occur.
I want to talk a little bit about the Whitmore Village project too. Maybe if you could tell us what that is as an example of being able to create land and space for farmers to grow diversified ag in central Oahu.
Well, it's not necessarily creating land, but purchasing it. Like Alex said, we used to be sugar and pineapple. And a lot of the laws on the books, believe it or not, are still for sugar and pineapple. So we really got to look at our current infrastructure of ag inventory, the policies in general, and see how we can rewrite them to support the kind of things that they're talking about, which will include purchasing more ag land. A lot of the large landowners may not provide long-term leases. Maybe even 5 years would be too short. They can't really get a loan on 5 years. So it's up to the state to figure out how we're going to add more land to our inventory to provide leases if we're serious about food production. With a long-term lease, the state can lease up to 65 years. I think we can start to see orchards, oranges, lemons, breadfruit. Hawaii right now doesn't do orchards. We'll see a lot of different types of crops, but we have to go ahead and purchase land. The reason why the Whitmore project, I guess, works for me is it's my district. So I've been able to, with the help of my colleagues, get about $100 million over the last 6 years being spent in either purchasing land or water infrastructure or recycling facilities or housing and some workforce development programs.
And it's fitting that we're talking to you at the end of the panel here because I wonder, as engaged citizens, on this election night, what can we do to help further this? What can we do to help fill that gap? Is it writing to your, local state senator and representatives and saying make ag a priority, or what can people do to get more engaged in the process?
Well, I feel like society's changed a lot. You use the word citizenship. But we don't hear that too often. We hear more, I'm a taxpayer. So I'm a taxpayer, so what are you doing for me? So that really doesn't put any responsibility on the voter or the taxpayer. But once we say we're a citizen, then what's our role? How do we participate? And that does include getting involved in the process, showing up, emailing, calling, getting politically involved so that policymakers will make the right choices.